Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya, still enjoying the wintry weather of Britain. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Vimbai, and good morning, Ayo.
Good morning.
I hope you're all doing well.
Yes, we are.
Let me tell you what is happening around the world. But before I tell you about what is happening around the world, I can't tell you about what is happening around the world without wishing Ayo, Mayo, Essay a very, very happy birthday.
Thank you so
I'm hoping
much.
that this new age brings everything that you have ever wanted in your life.
Amen.
Very, very happy
Thank
birthday to
you.
you, my dear friend.
Thank you, Adefemi.
Okay, now we're ready for the World Brief. Always a pleasure. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, see, almost a decade after he came into power, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation. In addition to announcing his resignation, he's also announced the suspension of Parliament until March 24th, which he says should give his Liberal Party enough time to find his replacement. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Last night over dinner, I told my kids about the decision that I'm sharing with you today. I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process. Last night, I asked the President of the Liberal Party to begin that process. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election.
Well, very, very interesting words there from Justin Trudeau. Now, as we know, he's now become the latest incumbent to fall victim to growing voter dissatisfaction. It's a thread, it's a theme that we have seen across the world, across the African continent when it comes to elections, and something we've been seeing with his geographical neighbor, the United States. Now, when Justin Trudeau came into power back in 2015, he came in after 10 years of conservative rule in Canada. He came in at a time where the Canadian public were desperate for a liberal alternative, and so he came in a sweep of popularity. People welcomed him and the liberalism that he sought to represent. He is also he came in as the son of arguably one of Canada's most popular prime ministers. His father, Pierre Trudeau, also arguably one of the most popular prime ministers in Canadian history. So unfortunately, over the course of this near decade, his popularity, most especially in the last 2 to 3 years, has considerably dropped. And one of the reasons for that drop in popularity has been the rising cost of food, the rising cost of housing, and surging immigration. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because many people would argue that the recently concluded US elections that took place in the United States in November. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yes. So if that does ring any bells, the fact that there were growing discontent in Canada due to a growing number, the rise of the price of food, of accommodation, and also surging immigration, that's because many people would argue that the US election, which took place in November 2024, was largely won and lost over those same issues. Growing discontent when it comes to immigration, the economy, the price of food. So unfortunately, we are seeing that has clearly been the issue when it comes to the external issues that Justin Trudeau was facing. Now, you heard the Canadian Prime Minister talk about internal battles that he's had to fight, and that comes at a time where people within his government, within his party, within his cabinet really have seemed to shift away from him. That has been exemplified in the very abrupt resignation of his deputy and the Minister of Finance in Canada, Chrystia Freeland, who resigned in December. Again, signaling the fact that she didn't feel as though Justin Trudeau had the right tenets in his leadership to stave off against different threats. She released a very public resignation letter in which she talked about Donald Trump's comments and how she didn't think that Justin Trudeau had done enough to protect Canada. Just when we look at President-elect Donald Trump, he's joked and jested about Canada being the 51st state, and also has made very strong threats against Canadian goods, says that he's going to slap a 20% 25% tariff on Canadian imports into the United States, which is clearly going to have even more drastic ramifications for the Canadian economy. And the finance minister, in her resignation letter, felt as though Justin Trudeau did not do enough to protect Canadian interests. So as it stands now, he's suspended Parliament. We're going to have to see who the party, the Liberal Party, comes up with in terms of a replacement. There's no clear front runner now. Of course, it could be Chrystia Freeland herself, or it could also be Mark Carney, who is the former governor of the Bank of England, who is also a Canadian. We'll have to wait and see. But this could also be an example of the resurgence of the Conservative Party coming back into power once again, as we've been seeing across the world and, of course, happening in the United States. So that's what's happening in Canada. If we shift our attention now to China, we know that the HMPV virus has been rustling a lot of feathers. Yesterday we discussed this during the newspaper review because the Nigerian federal government has made it clear that it's going to be focusing on the incoming flights from China, giving them special attention, screenings, just to protect the country from the resurgence of another virus. Now, this HMPV virus is also a respiratory virus, but professionals at this point have said it is not on the same level of severity as COVID-19. Now, the COVID-19 virus was novel, it was new, and that's why experts say it had such a catastrophic effect around the world. But with this HMPV virus, though we cannot dismiss the severity associated with it, many people are still saying that this is not a huge cause for concern. Nevertheless, we are seeing cases rise, of course, in China, across the Far East. We're seeing cases in Malaysia, in Hong Kong, and now most recently in India. So you can imagine Nigeria being proactive to making sure that it is protecting the country as best it could. And finally, here in the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has hit back at Elon Musk. Elon Musk has spoken quite critically of UK politics, of Keir Starmer himself, of the Reform Party's leadership. But about Keir Starmer, he says that he hasn't done enough to protect the United Kingdom against these sex abuse, child grooming gangs. And these are very, very serious allegations that Keir Starmer has hit back at with this speech. Let's take a listen to what Keir Starmer had to say.
Question of Elon Musk. Look, I think most people are more interested in what's going to happen to the NHS, frankly, than what's happening on Twitter. Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves. Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson, not interested in justice. They're supporting a man who went to prison for nearly collapsing a grooming case, a gang grooming case. These are people who are trying to get some kind of vicarious thrill from street violence that people like Tommy Robinson promote. And those attacking Jess Phillips, who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend, not protecting victims. Jess Phillips has done 1,000 times more than they've even dreamt about when it comes to protecting victims of sexual abuse. Throughout her entire career, I'm prepared to call out this for what it is. We've seen this playbook many times, whipping up of intimidation and threats of violence. On the question of
So very, very strong words coming from Keir Starmer there. He is talking about Jess Phillips, who is the UK Minister for Safeguarding, who's come under severe criticism and threats in some cases because many people, Elon Musk and his supporters, especially on the right wing, feel as though she hasn't done enough to protect children against these sex abuse grooming scandals. But as you could hear from Sir Keir Starmer, he's taking this very seriously and says that Elon Musk and the people he is in support of, most notably Tommy Robinson, aren't the people that anybody should be listening to. Those are your stories on the World Brief. Love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
All right, Adefemi, thank you so much for that roundup. Gosh, where do we begin? Quickly in Canada, I think you've said most of what needs to be said. On my part, I think a lot of attention has shifted towards Pierre Poilievre, who is the Conservative leader who's modeling himself around Donald Trump's persona, as people say. Of course, he hasn't come out to say that himself, but if you listen to his rhetoric and the way he speaks and, sort of the way his demeanor even, it's very Trump-like. I'm not sure if it's a coincidence or if if it's intentional. But immediately following Justin Trudeau's resignation, he came out and said that, oh, it doesn't matter if he's resigned. They're all the same. All liberals are to blame for all of our problems and so forth. It was a very Trump-esque kind of comment. And, he's gone as far as calling the inflation in Canada just inflation, So he's very much modeled. And it will be interesting to see whether Canadians gravitate towards that kind of persona in the same way we saw Americans gravitate towards a Donald Trump type of persona. And then the other story very quickly, Elon Musk and Keir Starmer. So I think at the foundation of this is when the riots took place last year. There was a lot of crackdown around insightful tweets or insightful messaging shared on social media. And of course, X is one of those platforms that came under spotlight. And Elon Musk really kicked back. I don't know if you remember during that period around the immigration related riots. And so I think that Elon Musk has just found something to pick a fight about, because he's not happy about the fact that there is going to be some form of regulation around social media very soon in the United Kingdom. And he feels that people are being gagged, their freedom of speech is being taken away. Of course, ultimately it's bad for business. Let's call a spade a spade. He doesn't care about people's freedom of speech. It's business for him, which is why we have to be very, very careful about these billionaires being allowed in the corridors of power. We've seen it time and time again. Elon Musk knows exactly what he's doing. Over the past few weeks, he's brought in what is known as the Stellenbosch Mafia to meet with Donald Trump. These are all of the Afrikaans billionaires from South Africa, all of the white guys who are in charge of keeping white monopoly capital in charge of the South African economy, Johan Rupert and so forth. They've already had time with Donald Trump and they're already setting their agenda. So Elon Musk is somebody we have to continue to watch very closely.
I totally agree with that sentiment. We've talked about it a number of times that Elon Musk is becoming a loose cannon that might just be too loose for, especially his interference in international politics. You've seen him, I'm sure he prides himself with having some measure of influence on the American election through his X platform and his very vocal support of Donald Trump. Also interfering, if I can use that word, in British politics. Yesterday we talked about how it said that Nigel Farage was not competent enough to be leader of the Reform Party in the UK and has in many ways supported Kevin Badenoch. He's also spoken about the Italian, in Italian politics, taught on Canada. So he is stretching himself quite widely and it might be about time for him to be contained. And we've often said we'd see how his relationship would play out with Donald Trump after inauguration. We don't know if the romance will continue or if there might be a falling out. If the two egos are if the two egos are too big to, for what the White House to contain. But let me go to Canada. And like you mentioned, you detailed what happened yesterday. Yesterday we watched the live speech by PM Justin Trudeau. Like you mentioned, he came in 2015 on a majority win, sweeping with the Liberal Party on the promise of a new progressive era of sunny ways. He's gone on in terms of his achievements over the years, even though he's currently unpopular with the people, but he has had some good, record in terms of his administration. He's been committed to 50% women participation in his government, and he has been able to keep to that promise. His cabinet still has 50% representation. He promised progress on reconciliation with Indigenous people in Canada. He's still very much on that. He also talked about bringing in the national carbon tax, as well as, I don't know if this one is popular but controversial, the legalizing recreational cannabis. But also, to his credit as well, he's also advocated and pushed and ensured tax-free child benefits in Canada. So a few of his wins there. But over the years, he's also had some controversies, even on very personal fronts. Monies he's received from charities he's been involved in. His family as well benefiting in different ways. Remember the controversy with his brown face, and other things like that. So this call has been from last year. Now, in Canada, an election by law has to be called by October of this year. The conversation I was having earlier on was the timing of his resignation, and if it's enough time, or perhaps it gives an advantage to the Conservatives in the next election, as a lot of people still see that the Liberal Party are currently quite unpopular in Canada. However, the next leader of the Labour Party might be the game changer and might just be able to give them that much needed win come October 2025. But we'll continue to watch. Also, just to finally say, the human metapneumovirus numbers have increased in India. Very importantly, how it affects Africa and Nigeria in particular. NCDC has said there's no need to worry yet, but we must all be very aware and understand just how the virus plays out and be very particular about public health and washing hands, cleanliness, hygiene, very importantly, and the borders, to ensure that we're able to really check the borders, especially people traveling from China and India.
Okay, the key editorial points to note with Canada and the collapse, more or less, of Justin Trudeau's prime ministership is the fact that he himself referred to internal battles within his party. Now, when Chrystia Freeland pulled out of the coalition in December 2024, it was already dead meat. Because when it came to power, when the Liberal Party came to power in 2015, it was a minority party. It could only sustain itself in government by forming an alliance with the New Democrats, led by Freeland, and also with the Bloc Québécois, the nationalist party, Bloc Québécois. And that is what sustained that party in the Canadian Parliament and gave it the opportunity to rule. However, with Freeland pulling out, with other ministers resigning, that coalition had effectively collapsed. Now, what the polls say is that the Conservatives are leading, the main opposition party in Canada, they're leading by double-digit ratio for over a year now. Even if an election were to be held, as the law says, on or before, not later than 20th October, the Liberal Party has no strength to win. So it was clear to Justin Trudeau that the game was up. And the clear thing for him to do is to say, well, let him just, stand aside. However, he says he has prorogued Parliament, suspended Parliament to 24 March. Now, if Parliament, reconvenes on 24th March, the plan is for the opposition parties to pass a vote of no confidence in his government and by then force an election early in spring, long before October 20. So this is the situation, the real politics. But whoever emerges as the next prime minister will still have to deal with the Trump factor. Trump saying that Canada is no better than the 51st state, and that in any case, Canada should just merge with the United States if they want to pay lower taxes and they want to be protected from Russian and Chinese ships. As for Elon Musk, it's not only Keir Starmer that is complaining about Elon Musk. Yesterday, before Sir Keir Starmer spoke, Keir, by the way, is K-E-I-R, before Keir Starmer spoke yesterday, the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, had complained. Emmanuel Macron had complained about Elon Musk trying to use his financial muscle, the world's richest man, to influence elections in Europe, and they objected to it. Then Keir Starmer also had to come in to talk about lies, misinformation, and how Elon Musk and Kemi Badnoch are jumping on the far-right bandwagon. That far-right bandwagon, the trigger for it now, is the child inquiry, the 2002 child inquiry. At a time when Keir Starmer was director of public prosecution, and there was issue of these gang rapes, involving children, and they said the thing was covered up by the police, covered up by the office of the DPP, because British Pakistani persons were involved. That's the trigger for it. But beyond that, Elon Musk has been interfering in politics, not just in Britain, but also in England. You see that he says he wants to give money to Nigel Farage, Reform UK, or he will change his mind. He will say Tommy Robinson or Rupert Lowe should be the next leader because Nigel Farage doesn't have what it takes, or he would, start romancing the Conservative Party. But what the European leaders are worried about is about the influence of money and of foreign interference. About the about the HMPV, now 5 cases have been reported in India. But the India Council of Medical Health says people should not panic, that it's not as bad as COVID-19. And 5 cases so far in Tamil Nadu, in other parts of India that have been identified, including New Delhi, and also other parts. But the thing, as has been said, is that, well, it could lead to complications, even if it's not as serious as COVID-19, because it can cause bronchitis, it can cause pneumonia, it can affect children that are under 5. I think the rule for Nigeria is to be vigilant, and for the Nigerian government to issue an advisory so that people can take care. During COVID-19, we were told that you are your best protector by washing your hands, wearing a mask, taking the necessary precautions. But this is not yet a global pandemic.
Agreed.
That was Adefemi Akinsoye. She gave us the world brief.